tell you what.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Chondro Lounge. We are on episode 13, and it's just going to be Chuck and I, and we got a good one that we're going to be talking about. I think it's one that, I don't know, Chuck, coming into the industry, having great mentors and everything, you know, I think everyone says like the safe thing to do is to buy a captive bred animal, but we're going to be talking today about captive bred versus wild caught animals and which one you should buy, whether it's your first or your fifth chondro. Is buying a wild caught or a captive bred the smarter move? And when is it a good move to buy one or the other? So, Chuck, I know that we can talk about the wild caught side a bunch with you. I've bought a bunch of captive bred and have a few import animals as well. So I think that I feel like we're qualified, right? Like we can talk a little bit about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but before we jump in, guys, I want to go ahead and throw a couple shout outs. We have Cold Blooded Cafe, that is a sponsor of the Reptile Lounge Network, as well as, you know, here at the Chondro Lounge and over at the Retic Lounge. I know that a lot of people here in the Chondro community love to use Cold Blooded Cafe. I do as well. I just put an order in a couple weeks ago, and so we have a nice 20% off code for you guys to use. So if you guys are needing some rodents, wanting a discount, use Reptile Lounge 20 for 20% off. And then if you go on their website, and even with this discount, if you still spend over $200, you can add in a code on their website for free shipping. They'll hook you guys up. Yeah, if you guys are ordering and need those rodents, make sure you put your order in the week before you need them. They typically send them out the following week, but they are phenomenal feeders. You know, the order that I just got was a great order. Everything was shipped and packaged perfectly. So shout out to Chris and Des and the rest of the team over at Cold Blooded Cafe. And then I do want to give another shout out to Hearland Reptiles, enclosure sponsor. Guys, we talked about this last episode, but Hearland Reptiles was creating these indestructible enclosures for retics and monitors, these larger aluminum enclosures, and he has scaled them down for the chondro community after talking with myself and with Mark Hager. Any of you guys have seen Mark's new room that he's put up? Those are all Heartland enclosures. Yeah, they're great enclosures. I have a couple here, and Chuck, we still need to get you yours. Have you reached out to him?
No, he reached out to me and said something about it, but I wasn't, you know, he was just apologizing. I forget what he said the holdup was, but I don't
the
mind.
Tracks, I think. Tracks or glass or something, but anyways, if you guys want to get something that's brand new out there that doesn't look like everyone else's enclosures and literally will outlast probably 3 full chondros lifetime, if not more. You buy one enclosure, you'll never have to replace it. That's for sure. He also does provide a warranty on them as well. So reach out to Jordan with Hearland Reptiles. He'll hook you up. Whether you've poured your heart and soul into your reptile business or you've just begun your business journey, AE Foundry has you covered with next level expertise in graphic design, motion graphics, videography, photography, and so much more. If you've been dying for a new logo for your reptile business, motion graphics for your current logo, a new website, or need assistance making your video podcast come to life, then listen carefully. AE Foundry's mission places storytelling at its core. AE Foundry believes that a distinctive story and background are the driving forces that set your brand apart. In today's market, consumers seek more than just products. They crave a connection built on trust with the brands they cherish. AE Foundry is committed to empowering small businesses and fostering authenticity that resonates with their consumers. Reach out to them and let them help you craft a visual narrative that helps establish a genuine and lasting connection with your audience. To contact AE Foundry, email them at aromero@aefoundry.com or on Instagram at AE Foundry. All right, Chuck. So I don't know, man. Where do you want to start as far as like this whole debate on buying CBB, buying wild caught animals? I feel like there's a lot of good information on both sides, but I guess one thing that I've seen a lot of, like being kind of newer into buying these animals, is you see a lot of people that are just basically like stay away from imports, right?
Yeah,
I mean that's what I see everywhere. And naturally when people say stay away from imports, I'm probably gonna go get a few imports, right?
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
that's just the way that my blood works. But yeah, I'll share my experiences with imports a little bit later. But I guess let's talk about the overall, like, I guess purchasing experience. So if you get a wild caught animal versus buying a captive bred animal, Chuck, like what are you getting at the like level of like the breeder that you're buying from or the importer that you're buying from and the information from the animal?
It depends on who you're purchasing it from. I mean, if you're just getting it off of a show table, don't expect, if it's a wild caught animal, don't expect to have any sort of guidance from the person that sold it to you.
Right.
Um, I think if you are going to go with an importer or an import animal, go with a good importer that will be able to support you through it or test their stuff for Nido, whatever it may be, like Dan Maleri, um, Gary, Gary Scavino, I think is doing some imports. So guys like that, at least you can call somebody and get some information from them if you have any issues with it or how it was feeding or what it liked, if it liked a certain technique.
Right. Right. I think just generally speaking, right? So you have Gary, right? And Gary is getting these imports from an importer, right? And so he's bringing them in and he's doing great stuff. He'll test them and get them established, stand up guy, right? And then you're talking about like Dan Maleri. Dan Maleri is kind of the first like major importer that has been throwing Nido tests with the purchase of his chondros. I don't know a lot of people, man, because when importers bring in, uh, generally speaking, when importers bring in a batch of chondros, it's generally a lot, right? So it's an expensive, very expensive for these breeders to, or not breeders, for these importers to test an entire, right, to provide
Hmm.
a nidovirus test with each of their animals. So yeah, I would say generally speaking, though, when you go with an import, you're not necessarily getting, I guess, like that great customer service always, in terms of like just like being able to go back to that person, ask them questions, basically find a mentor, right?
Hmm. Oh,
Um,
I'm sorry. I'm getting waterfall texts right now, and it's just dinging in my ear. I don't know why. Oh my
you're good.
goodness.
I'll keep talking. So yeah, and I think that on the flip side, CBB, there's a few things I think that are kind of important to talk about when you buy CBB, right? So, um, when you purchase a captive bred animal from the breeder itself, um, most of the time, not all the time, you are purchasing lifetime support with that animal, right? At least that's what I provide as a breeder for the snakes that I breed, not chondros, but when I get there, I'll do the same thing. Um, Chuck's the same way, right? He provides lifetime support for people that aren't even purchasing his animals, right? But goes out of his way to help people with the animals that they do have.
Yep.
Um, just the people that I have purchased an animal from, Gary, Mark, Patrick, Bill, these are all people as well that are going to provide you support, with the animal. Um, but I think another thing that's not spoken of a lot of is when you're buying an animal produced by someone, you are supporting that individual. And that's the same thing for a wild caught animal, right? So it's important that you know who you're buying from, right? Like do your homework. Um, Ask some people in the chondro community if you've heard good things about them. If you haven't, whatever the case may be. I've always been a person where, you know, your money is what how do I want to word this? your money is what helps support that person to continue to do what they're doing, right? So if there
Yep.
is a bad person out in the industry, right, they have a beautiful looking animal, right? You know, if you're going to buy that animal knowing that they are not a good person, they're shady, whatever the case may be, just because you want that specific animal, just know that you are helping contribute to that person be successful in the long run. That goes for any wild caught or, you know, CBB, whatever the case may be. But um, yeah, just make sure that you are buying from someone that's willing to provide that support if you're going to go the CBB route, because I think the biggest downside, you know, it's a upside for breeders, right? But it's a downside for a consumer. But I think the biggest downside of a captive bred animal is the price.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that?
Uh, hmm, I mean, yeah, but the thing is, if you don't mind, I guess I'm trying to think of like the right thing to say. I can't really think of it. It's escaping me.
If you don't mind
Dude,
dropping $4,500 on
yeah,
lineage.
I'm trying to basically say, you know, if you like knowing where your money goes, you're paying for the, you know, that breeder is feeding every meal to that animal from the time it came out of the egg. He could tell you exactly how to fix any feeding issues, you know, send you feeding videos of it, and where to tap on the neck, where to tap on the tail. Does it like if you tug when it bites? All those little tiny things that would get an animal to feed. You can refer back to him, the husbandry that he was keeping or she was keeping. It's invaluable to have all of that information because it's basically like a personalized owner's manual to know
Right.
exactly what will work for that animal.
Right. No, I agree with that, but that still doesn't change the fact that it hurts the bank when you buy a lot of captive bred animals. You know,
Yeah.
the value is there, right? Like I am not shitting on the market and why these animals are expensive. There's a very good reason why CBBs are expensive. They're not the easiest snake to hatch. They are by far, you know, they are not the easiest snakes to get established, right? So there's a reason why the price is up there. But that's also the reason why so many people, when they're getting their first chondro, are like, oh, there's a really cool looking Biak for $500. And then you go to a captive bred person and, you know, even a captive bred Biak, right? $1,500. And they're like,
Hmm.
what's the difference?
Yeah.
Um,
It's the hours invested into the animal. You're paying for all those man hours to get that animal established.
right. And you know, when you get a CBB animal as well, um, generally speaking, you're going to get a snake that, you know, once it's no longer this tiny little neo and juvenile, generally speaking, the snake is going to be manageable to handle, to hold.
Mhm.
Going to be a pretty chill, low key, low maintenance type of animal right off the bat, right? So that's another really good positive about CBBs is that they are super low maintenance.
Yeah, should be.
Should
Should
be
be.
for the most part.
Yeah, but they're a lot more forgiving of your mistakes, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah,
the
yeah.
bread stuff. Even
Um,
though I've seen my fair share of imports just have the will to survive. Um, I think a good genetically diverse, meaning not heavily inbred or line bred, captive born and bred animal is probably your best chance at having success long term.
right. Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're like new at this.
Hmm.
You know, I'll just say this right off the bat, right? I'm trying to be non-biased, right? Throughout this episode, just to kind of present both sides. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say this. This is your first chondro. Go cat to bread. My opinion. I'm not saying that it's, you know, I'm not saying if you get an import, it's going to be a failure. Not necessarily. Um, but if you want your first experience, like for me, for example, um, you know, maybe you're one of those people that have stayed away with wanting to buy a chondro because of you being worried about their husbandry and their care and all that stuff. Go with a captive bred animal because it's for the most part, again, getting from a reputable breeder. It should already have a bunch of meals. It's going to be a pretty bulletproof animal unless you don't know what you're doing, in which case you know, I don't know. You should probably be listening to a husbandry episode instead of this one.
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm. Yeah, I think yeah, I don't think you could say it any better. The captive bred animals, if it's going to be your first one, is all the mistakes that you're going to make. It should be able to handle it, within reason.
Right. Um, I feel like we both had this like tired energy going on, so I'm going to switch topics real quick, and I'm going to ask you. Speaking of captive bred, how's your clutch doing?
They're good. I just had, God, they're taking forever to shed. That's the problem. I have a few meals in most of them that have not shed yet to get them to shed, to grow. I talked to Ryan Young about it. I know he typically waits quite a while, and he actually told me if they're taking forever to shed, then do feed them because it means they may not have absorbed enough yolk. So
Okay.
I think I have three more that still need to shed, and I forget how old they even are. To be honest with you, I think they're like 5.5, maybe 5 weeks. I think they're 5 weeks old.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
so last episode was about 2 weeks ago. That's when it was the weekend you just started feeding them. And so I think there were 2 weeks. So yeah, 4 or 5 weeks, something like that.
mhm.
Um,
And I think I have 15 out of 19 that have taken a meal on their own.
no shit. Okay. Well, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I'm not disappointed with the results. I could tell you that.
No, not at all. And how do you are you going to be making them available? Are you sending pictures out? Are you taking pictures? What are you doing?
I pictured half of the clutch, but the other half I didn't picture because at that time I think like six of them still hadn't shed. So they were kind of looking dull and, a little crinkly and stuff like that because they're just holding on to that egg skin. So I wanted to wait until everybody shed out to get the second half of photos. But yeah, they are going to be, or they are available. What I'm doing is I'm taking deposits, initial deposit, second deposit in January, and then last deposit right before shipping in spring. But the deposits I'm getting now are basically in that order that I get deposits is the number pick you get from the clutch.
Okay, cool.
So I think I took a deposit on on the eighth snake. So I think I have 8 spots filled so far.
All right, good shit. Um, man, that's quick work.
Yeah, I really haven't like advertised because I got people reaching out say, "Hey, can you send me pictures? I want to see which one I want to pick." And I'm telling them I'm not allowing picks right now of individual animals because I don't know, they're not that old. I want to make sure I know which ones I think I'm going to probably have a problem with, and that might have to like exclude from the picks for a little while. While I
Right,
let people, when majority of them are ready. So,
right. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Um, so I want to talk a little bit more about the captive bred side when it comes to which one you should consider or what are the pros and cons of captive bred. Um, let's play devil's advocate here. Off the top of your head, besides price, is there anything that you could think of that's a downside to captive bred?
um, man, and the only thing that I could possibly think of, and I don't know if it's different between imports and captive breds, but I've seen a lot of adult captive bred females not relocate well to a new home.
Okay, yeah. So
Like
talk
beyond 4.5, 5.5 years old.
that adjustment is pretty hard on some.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would say that at least on the retic side, it's been a little. It can be hit or miss, right? Like sometimes you'll get a female move to you and it wants to breed right away because of the change in location, whatever the case may be. But other times it takes about 2 seasons for them to acclimate, even though they're already at breeding age. Um, but yeah, I wonder if that would be the same thing for the males. Maybe some difficult with acclimation, but I mean, males are generally a lot easier to, or a lot more likely to like want to breed a female if she's ready.
Yeah, I think that you have different personalities with every single animal. I think it would be animal specific and condition specific. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think it's more so as a husbandry thing or just an adjustment thing for some of those females?
Um, I think it's just adjustment because you even have like different barometric pressures that you can't even really sense that make them feel, different. Barometric pressure is a very big influencer on snake movement.
Right.
Lower the pressure, low pressure system coming in, a rainstorm kind of gets them moving.
Right.
So
Um,
yeah, I think with different pressures, then if you send a snake that's going from Florida to Phoenix, that's going to be an unbelievable change because of if the room it's in is influenced by the seasonal temperatures, and then you factor in what the humidity levels probably are, it's going to turn its world upside down.
yeah.
They feel that.
Oh, without a doubt. Um, and I personally don't see a lot of females that are captive bred that are up for sale. I mean, you'll see some males from time to time. Then again, I don't really check morph market too much.
Yeah, I haven't been on Morph Market so long. I was
That's
so overloaded
I
with
was gonna say
animals.
that's because you've bought a shit ton of animals recently. There's no reason why you should be on morph market.
Yeah, I go on there. I'm like, wow, there's 2 pages of new stuff. This is great.
um, let's really go over, and I think a large part of this conversation is going to be in regards to wild caught animals. But I'll say this: I think that the propaganda, I'll say, to stay away from wild caught is, I think, a little bit. And again, this is me new, right? New in this side of the industry, and I think it's a little bit overhyped. As in, like, don't buy wild caught animals. Um, and I think wild caught animals bring in a lot of value. So Chuck, I kind of want to start with you in regards to the pros of getting wild caught animals, because I mean, that's probably the vast majority of your collection.
Yeah, it is. Um, I would say the pros to getting wild caught animals is you have animals with new blood um, that you have no idea what it's capable of producing. I think that's probably the biggest advantage, honestly. I think that there's still hidden gems out there in the wild, and somebody one day is going to hit the lottery with some sort of, co-dominant trait of this wild looking animal, and then it could quite possibly turn into an actual morph.
Oh, you went
Um,
the morph route with this.
yeah,
I mean,
there's gotta be, there has to be. How
I
can there
mean,
not?
albinism, but
Right, but I'm talking like a co-dominant trait, like
yeah, like
Gary's.
incomplete. Like it's gonna definitely replicate each pairing.
Yeah, like Gary Scavino just got in that Maniquari with that big white spot on it. Now I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's some sort of a scar, but what if that is something?
What if it is? Right? I mean, we don't know. And
Pie,
I mean, what if it
pie,
keeps getting more
pie,
white spots?
yeah, pie ball is a very common thing in a lot of animals.
Right.
There's a green tree out there right now with piebald blood.
You think so?
Yeah, I,
Probably.
there has to be.
There has to. Something, right? Like there's got to be
It's
something.
it's Morelia. It's in ball pythons. It's in Burmese pythons. Is it in retics?
Piebald, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, piebald. I mean, it's in rat snakes. It's in I don't think we've seen, maybe Australia. I don't know. I'm wondering if it has carpet.
carpet.
I
I
don't
don't
think
know.
so. And
I don't
that's
know.
Morelia.
Right, but
Um,
I think that there's something floating around that we're gonna
weird.
find. Yeah, that haunts my mind, man.
Right. And at least if we're not talking about the incomplete dominant, the Hail Mary, right, of bringing in these animals, um, I think just speaking to the gene pool, right, and having fresh blood, um, we had Garrick on, right, last episode, and he's working with a foundation of blue animals from import animals, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so, when you're talking about getting a CBB animal captive bred, and it has a, great lineage behind it, what's the number one locality people want to take that to?
I'd probably say Wamina.
Yeah, well, Mina or Biak, right?
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of people are wanting to take those to wild caught animals because they are, again, that spontaneous, genetic pool, plus just what the phenotypic expression of these animals are, many times increase your odds and chances of producing that freak animal, right?
Yeah, but to speak. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were done.
No, no, I was. The only thing I was going to add is like you look at what made the sickness, right? And it was a captive bred animal to a Wamina type import locality,
Hmm.
right?
Yep. And if you're talking about Garrick, and he's a perfect example. A perfect example of it is that imported animals, or animals that are not heavy designer line, typically have much larger clutches of eggs.
Okay, so from a breeding standpoint, more lucrative, or at least increasing your odds of more babies surviving.
Correct. Yep. 100%.
Um, yeah, and it at this point you can get captive bred Beox, right? I have two of them.
Hmm.
Um, but there's also that, again, that outlier of what can happen with fresh blood, that I think just makes things very exciting.
Yeah, and especially Beox. I mean, they're just complete wild cards. Like you said, you could pair it up with a designer and just make some crazy shit.
Right. And I think people like us on podcasts and other people need to stop publicly sharing that Beox are probably the best locality to take designers into, because I don't want to see an increase of price for Beox imports, man.
Yeah.
Because, a couple of years ago, you could find a red Neo Beox that was amazing for $400. Now we're starting to see that
Hmm.
price get closer to 750.
Yeah. Yeah. They're I like the one oh never mind. I'm not gonna say that. It's a
Come on.
secret. No. But yes, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I mean the Reds hold some crazy prices, and if you look at it, a lot of the imports are pretty close to not designer prices, but captive bred locality animals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at a high blue example of a Jaya or a Maniquori, those things that are imported, or any Highland, right, that has a lot of blue in it, or you look at a high white Aru. I mean, you're still talking at like, $1,500 for an import.
Hmm.
But at that point, you're getting an animal that's much closer to breeding.
Correct.
Um, and so I think that, I think as we go in and we're talking about pricing, I think pricing is also the second, we talked about just like gene pool, right, of being advantageous, but pricing is advantageous, right? You'll often, you will see the very, very high end import stuff run a little bit more. Um, but when we're talking about like the high end import stuff versus the high end designer stuff, that's captive bred, we're still talking thousands of dollars less for an import. Um, and I even want to just make a disclaimer out there so I don't sound like a douchebag or sound like I'm cheap. Um, a cheap snake is not a good reason to buy a snake, because you should have money put into enclosures. You should have money put aside for vet bills, for medication. You should have money for emergencies. Like, if your budget for an animal is, $750, that animal needs to be $400 because you need 350, to have in the back to make sure that your animal is going to be healthy and stay. Like, if you spend all of your snake money on just the animal, um, and you half-ass the caging, you don't have a lot of money for a potential emergency. As you get that animal, like you're kind of shit out of luck.
Yeah, and when you factor in price of it. If you do buy a cheap import, let's just say a 6-month-old animal versus 6-month-old captive bred, it's gonna pretty much equal the same price, because as soon as that animal's been out in the bush, most likely you're gonna have to clean it out, and that's not cheap, you know.
No.
Especially if you don't know what you're doing and you don't do it yourself and you have to pay a vet. It's just the vet bills are just going to amount to the same price as a captive bred animal with a lot less problems.
Yeah, you're gonna end up spending $500 to $1,000 with a vet, having to take care of a lot of the things that imports come in with. But, um, and I
Right.
guess I would even say, before we get into the cons of imports, and then Chuck, I'll kind of let you run away as we talk about the nitty and gritty of keeping imports. Um, because we can go back real quick to the CB side and talk about just housing and husbandry, what that looks like, just vaguely, and like what it takes to keep these animals and have them thrive, and then have to do the same for an import, right? When you first get it, quarantine, all that stuff for both sides. But yeah, when it comes to the I guess where was I going with this? I just had a blank in my head.
Man, we're really stuck on stupid tonight.
We are, but that's okay, because we're both exhausted and have had a long last couple weeks. So, and again, I feel like this episode is really geared for some of the newer people coming in. We've had a lot of people in the comments of the last intro episode type of thing we did, that wanted like more of this. Yeah, because at the end of the day, this is a very fast growing community with a lot of new people coming in. As a matter of fact, I got a really good retic buddy of mine who probably in the last like week has just dropped like $9,000 on different chondros.
I really do feel like they're the most progressive species being kept and bred right now in the hobby.
Yeah, you got to be careful using the word progressive. We'll lose some listeners.
We'll lose all we'll lose all the good ones if I start to use the word progressive.
But no, I wanted to say, let's I guess talk about, at least for now, until I can think of some more, the downsides of keeping imports.
Definitely cleaning them out and getting them acclimated to being bred and to being kept in captivity. There's a couple little quirks they have to them where there's I had a female come in, and you can tell she still had her jungle skin on her, and she would not eat a rat. She didn't know what it was, and I ended up putting chicken down on it, and she took it.
Okay.
So I forget there's a YouTube video I was watching. It may have been one of Dan's, where like a delivery of all the food items came in, and it was I'm almost certain it was all like baby chicks. It's all chickens. So maybe they're eating that over there in the farms. It's a little bit easier to breed and more cost effective to feed them, poultry rather than mammals.
Right.
I don't know.
So getting them established and just like getting them to eat.
Every single snake's different. It's haven't had any like long-term or concerning feeding issues with any of the imports. I find the imports are obviously a little bit more bitey or scared, because the imports view you as a threat.
Right.
Right.
You're a monster.
And that stresses them out. And what's the leading cause of death in reptiles? Stress. They will starve themselves. They will stop eating if they're stressed out.
Right.
So seeing you stresses them out, when that's not even an issue with captive bred animals. 99% of captive bred animals see us as a non-threat. They saw us out of the egg. We are not a stressor.
They see us as like their food source.
Yeah, we are not.
It takes a while for an import to make that switch.
Yeah, from the time they came out of the egg, they were never harmed by us. But an import,
I don't know, man. I've seen how a lot of people feed their babies, man, and they're like beating that thing up. Seriously, I'm freaking. I've seen some videos of people online beating the shit out of their their neos and their juveniles that are still trying to get them to eat, and I'm over here trying to search for like animal abuse hotlines. Like
Yeah, I
they're
don't
kicking
really
their
do that.
snake's
I
ass.
mean, I play with it like a flirt stick for a excuse me, for a cat, like a feather stick. Just I do my little thing in there. I make it look like it's their prey item, and they get excited, when they move towards it and it moves backwards, and they have that like that quick jolt of adrenaline, like, oh, I might actually lose my meal if I don't act on this.
Where what's a flirt stick?
A flirt stick it's just a stick with feathers on the end of it. But it's something that they use
Okay.
in the dog world for like canines to see which
Gotcha. Okay,
puppies
so
have the
you're
biggest
talking
prey
about
drive.
those little, the fun little sex toy feather things.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That's basically what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. It also aligns with the stories that we heard at Bill's, so it makes sense. Um,
Sorry, I thought my kid was calling my name upstairs.
that's okay. Yeah, and I mean, I think that. So you were also talking about so getting them established, right, might be a little bit more difficult. I will say this: the Biak that I got from Dan Valeri, um, was probably in Dan's care after it hit the U.S. Was probably in Dan's care for a couple months, and then over here, right, the thing did not hesitate to take a meal, right? But I'm assuming that there are many people that get these animals way fresher off the boat, right? Or off the
Yeah,
plane or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, there's and I feel like that's where, for someone who's keeping an import, getting them real quickly, um, after they've been imported is probably where it gets really tricky.
yeah. I think the imports. I mean, I don't have enough evidence of it. This is just all my opinion. I feel as if the imports are a little bit better feeders when they get to your place, because even though they maybe are a little bit more stressed than what a captive bred would be shipped to you, they are much more survival driven. So they, from the beginning of their lives, they didn't have dead mice dangled in front of their face and offered to them once a week. So these things might go a month without eating sometimes if they're unsuccessful hunters.
Sorry,
But
was chewing ice.
yeah, you're good. But I offer, an adult female green tree that survived in the wild for at least 4 to 5 years. And she didn't even know what like a lab rat was. She didn't even care about it until I put chick down on it. And then she took it really slowly.
Okay. Little tip for you guys that are, maybe getting some of your wild caught animals to struggle with eating. And I mean, it sounds like overall just keeping wild caught animals and getting imports right fresh off the boat, or from a few months in captivity, it's just generally more stressful for the keeper. um Quarantine procedures, it really shouldn't be that much more strict than if you're bringing a captive bred animal into your collection, but there's a lot more that you have to do with an import that Chuck can speak on.
Yeah. I mean, mites are always a big thing if you're getting from certain places. Um, but that's just something you prepare for. Lucas has, a technique down with dipping them in a permethrin bath. I use them.
Hold up. Not permethrin bath that'll kill a snake in a heartbeat.
What do you do? Permethrin? I thought it was like a diluted permethrin solution.
Yeah, but they're not taking a bath in it.
You just like
You spray the enclosures up and down, and you wipe the paper towel all around in all the crevices. You let it air dry, right? You don't put a water. So typically, if I'm getting an import, right, I'm spraying it down with the mite treatment, 24 to 48 hours before it arrives, and then on day of arrival is when I'm putting the water bowl in there, making sure it's completely dry. And this is with any one of my snakes. Period. A captive bred, whatever the case may be. And then if the animal is old enough, right, if it's got a decent size, like I'm not going to do this with a hatchling or a neonate or a juvenile of any species, but mostly the imports that I've been getting are larger, right? They're probably 2 years plus. I got my
I'm
pair.
listening. I'm
Yeah,
listening. I'm just looking something up.
you're good. I got my 4 year. They're 5 years old now. The Arus, and then I have my Biak. But when you're taking them out, um, what you wipe down. So essentially, I'm spraying a paper towel with that permethrin spray till it's barely damp. Right, you don't want it to be soaking wet until it's like barely damp. And I have gloves on while I'm doing this because it's a chemical. You let the snake run through your hands with the paper towel, and you're just kind of rubbing the body of that animal. Permethrin on contact generally kills mites, right? So when you put a very light amount on a paper towel and then you're running it through the snake's body, any of the mites it's getting into contact with, or it has a film over its scales for a little bit, if they come out afterwards, right? Because sometimes they're under the scales. That contact generally kills the mite right away. Now there's not a mite treatment in the world that's going to kill the eggs, right? That's one thing that I don't know of, right? Maybe someone knows a technique, but you're not going to kill eggs. But that for me has always worked. I don't do this with the chondros, but with the retics, I'll put a little tiny piece of no pest strip in there. I don't think I would do that in a chondro enclosure. I don't know why. It's kind of that in the back of my mind, this delicate snake ordeal. But even that, I try not to use the pest strips just because I got my snakes in the garage with, a bunch of air circulating, and just breathing in no pest strips all the time it's your probably easiest way to get cancer by the age of 50.
Yeah. So Patrick Holmes actually, Pat soaks him. It's a permethrin soak.
Does he really?
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought.
I gotta talk to him about it.
Because I could have swore you told me you did it like Pat, and I was like, oh, okay, they both do that soak then of a permethrin like dilution. But there's a whole thing behind it. So just he soaks them beforehand in just water, get them drinking, hydrated, all that stuff, so that there's almost no chance that they drink the permethrin soak. But I don't know how long it's for. It could be for 30 seconds. I don't know.
It wouldn't need to be more, and that's why just the paper towel, I just like run it right over.
But he calls it a permethrin soak. So I forget. I think he told me one time, but
I know with the retics, as long as you don't spray in the upper third of them, you can douse them with the sprayer of permethrin right on the bottom 2/3 of them. But I still don't even do that, just because all of my snakes are handleable. So I'd take a damp paper towel and just run it through.
Right. Maybe we got off topic. What were we talking about?
No, that's okay. We're talking about the quarantine, and what you have to do for a wild caught animal that's different from a CB, that kind of makes it stressful.
I honestly think that you should, not that you will, but you should treat every single animal that comes into your collection the exact same way. Even if they're wild caught or captive bred, like precautionarily treating. Like for parasites, like I guess I'm not going to do panicure.
Yeah, I'm not doing panicure on a CB animal.
Well, you should do it. Well,
you're going to tell me I can
do it annually.
I feel like Bill would punch me in the face if I got one of his animals and then just gave it a dose of panicure.
So, and it's recommended by a few people that I know and have friends, and they treat annually with panicure on all their animals for their entire collection, as they saw parasites develop in their captive bred animals that had already been treated.
That's nuts. That's a whole new perspective. So, can you explain what panicure is for people that don't know?
Oh God, I don't know the pronunciation of it, but panicure basically just kills
it's a dewormer.
Hookworms. It's goat dewormer. It's the one you can get at Tractor Supply. You just have to figure out there's different concentrations, and then you have to do like a dosage chart and stuff. So if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. I mean, it's not like you can't like kill them, I guess, from overdose, but I guess you can overdose on anything, but there's not like real high risk of it from what I understand. And even just using it as a preventative, like if you just give it to them annually, like 2 doses, 2 weeks apart, there's no like detrimental effects from just doing it.
Yeah, and just to for everyone that like, so again, with wild caught imports, you're dealing with parasites as being a likely uh situation that you're going to be dealing with, and the way that you're going to find that out is through their feces, or when they pee or shit, you're going to see worms. And what look like little worms, they're white and they're thin, almost like clear, right?
They look like little, kind of like really thin grains of rice,
Yeah, exactly.
and they're like little circle, little half moons, like the letter C. So it's, but there's like a bunch of different worms. So like the best thing you should do is just get the stool and throw it in a plastic baggie and get a fecal float done on it and get what type of parasites, identified that are in it. But they're all going to just be sensitive to panic here. They should.
Yeah, so internal parasites, and then also one thing that you're going to deal with when it comes to the wild caught side is external parasites.
Yeah. So, well, there's subcutaneous parasites, which are
Yeah, exactly.
nematodes, which are parasites. It could be those little bumps you see underneath of the skin. I've never lanced them or cut them out or anything. My philosophy with my smaller imports that I got a few months ago, they have a couple little like dots or little bumps on them, and I figured they're so small now that if I just panic cure them, it's probably going to kill that. Hopefully, it kills it. If not, I'd have to use, what is it? Metronidazole,
I think so.
flagell. But I kind of want to like steer clear of that because that clears out all the microflora in the gut, and that can really like set them back, because then you have to rebuild the microflora in the gut. And there's really, from what my vet describes to me, reptile probiotics or whatever it is to get restore gut flora is not made for snakes. It's not made for Morelia, especially. It's made for reptiles, which he told me they typically use it in, like, it's a probiotic for like lizards, like bearded dragons or leopard geckos, like really common pets, and that they don't even get anything out of it, is what he told me.
Right. Um, I will say that like your quarantine procedure in general for any snake that comes in should be the same, right? Like whether it's a separate room or and treating for mites and doing an inspection when you get them. But uh, I would say like when you're dealing with imports, you're going to have a vast more complex issues more often, I guess, than you will with a captive bred animal. Um, is that Jill? No, that's your dog. What's up, dog?
It's my dog. Yeah. No, everyone's up my ass. No one could just leave me alone for an hour.
But I guess that you're probably, one thing about getting imports, right? Like you can get imports that, you know, they look healthy, they look hardy. And then there are people who buy imports and they get the import and the thing looks like it's like knocking on death's door.
They've rescued it from PetSmart.
Right. They've done something like that. So if you're going the import route, right, just know that you're going to have your hands full with a little bit more of the quarantine stuff and the treating stuff. And I don't know. I mean, have a vet on hand. If you're getting an import, right, and you're not confident on doing it yourself, Chuck, I mean, can you share a little bit about, like, again, we're not vets here. Don't go back to this
disclaimer.
Don't go back to this episode and be like, oh, like Chuck taught me how to do this. No, Chuck did not teach you how to do shit. But I'm curious for myself, Chuck, like, what do you do? How do you administer? Like, what are you doing?
So like, so ask me what I'm administering, because I've done so many things.
Yeah, I mean, you're the one dealing with imports, man. I got one that Dan gave me, and it's flawless. Didn't have mites. Didn't have anything, and it's literally on its like 8th meal with me in like, I don't know, 2.5 months.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about like just we'll go oral medications. If you're going to be administering Panacur, you're injecting that into the prey item because it's an oral suspension. You shouldn't be slamming syringes down your snake's throat.
No,
You should. Oh, hold on, that's a big ass friggin' centipede.
a centipede.
Fucking cocksucker. Yeah.
I'm not cutting this either.
Dude.
Yeah, we're. I was just saying like. I was just saying we're not cutting this, and all of the invertebrate lovers are gonna be like murderer.
Dude, this is like the episode of Breaking Bad where they're just trying to kill the fly the whole time. Oh my god, no, it was one of them house centipedes. It was like that big. And it was coming right towards me, and I don't like them. Oh god. So
That's
if you're
shit.
yeah. So like any oral medications you should be administering into the prey item, and you just inject it into the chest cavity. And I injected the chest cavity, go down. But you got to have the proper dosages. Like it's a whole science.
You have to get that from a vet.
You don't have to, but I have my vet do it because sometimes it confuses me because some of the medications are like different concentrations, like so many mgs per kg, and it's hard to explain. But like sometimes when I don't do the calculation correctly, I accidentally double I double up rather than doubling down backwards, if that makes any sense. It's like I put the decimal in the wrong place or something like that, and it ends up that I like add like double the dosage I was supposed to give rather than the proper dosage. So I always make sure I clear it through him. I give the animals weight, I give him the medication I'm going to be using, the concentration, and then I tell him the dosage that I want to give, and this is my ailment and this is the medication I think I should use, and he basically like confirms or denies what I'm thinking.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean that's a good again, consulting with a vet, right? The Panacur shits are gross, by the way.
I don't know that I really noticed.
Or is it the flagell shits? Is it that pink like gook that comes out?
It might be flagell. I've only flagelled one animal before, but the Panacur shits are disgusting because they're all dead worms. They poop They poop all the worms out.
You've seen? Do you have pictures of that? You gotta send me them. I won't put them on here, but I need to see what that looks like.
I don't know if I have them. If you just look up hookworms and snake poop, though, but yeah, I'll see if I can find it. But they're like, I don't know, like some of them been like yellowish, translucent, like little strings. Others have been like pinkish. I've had these little tiny worms that look like the letter C. I see some weird shit. None of them ever moving or anything. Everything's been dead.
Okay, fair.
So that's for worms, Panacur, and then you get into the a little bit of a heavier medications like metronidazole, which is Flagyl, I believe is Flagyl is the brand name, and then I've treated them with a multitude of different antibiotics. You have amikacin, you have Batrol, and they're two really heavy hitters. And then there's a couple other ones. I have a bunch of them upstairs because sometimes you'll get an infection that's a bacterial infection in an animal, and it's just resistant to Batrol or resistant to amikacin. It's deep. Imports. There's so much information I could go on for. I think we talked about this earlier that I wasn't just going to dissect it and go this far into it, but you could talk about an entire episode of just medications, and I'm not even proficient enough to be able to give like a good episode on it. We're still at the mouth. I mean, you can get ailments like mouth rot, and what can happen is, or what happened with me is, you'll get a respiratory infection, which will be bacterial, and you'll get a respiratory infection. You'll treat it with antibiotics, hoping that it works. And then I had that turn into mouth rot. And then mouth rot is, a bacterial infection in the mouth, and it causes these white, like ulcerous, growths on the gums, and from recommendation from my vet, I took a soft bristle toothbrush, dipped it in chlorhexidine, and just scrubbed all of the dead flesh or a tissue out of the mouth. And then that didn't work, and given antibiotics plus that, then we the antibiotics weren't working, so we had to take a culture, had the culture grown in a petri dish for a week at a lab, and then they tested, I think, 12 different antibiotics and actually identified 2 separate types of bacteria. And the reason the Baytril wasn't working when I was treating it is because one of the bacterias were resistant to Baytril. So the only thing they were sensitive to were like one weird one, and amikacin. And amikacin is like a really rough antibiotic on the snake's body. So it's always, I think it's recommended that you, what are those, the saline ringers or whatever it is. It's basically a saline solution to help hydrate the animal, because if I'm not mistaken, amikacin is extremely heavy on the kidneys and can cause complications further down the road. It's a lot.
Stressful.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
right. But I feel right. But again, I feel like anyone who's listening to this and hasn't gotten their first chondro, well, I mean, first and foremost, I'm just gonna say this: I don't think anyone's first chondro should be an import. That's like today moving forward, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were still at the mouth. We didn't even get to the butt yet.
Oh, let's get to the butt. Let's get to the butt. What happened to the butt?
See, I just started to do this.
You're talking about your enemas,
the enemas. Because what happens is, I don't know if it's specifically in imports, because I've had similar issues with my captive bred as well. But a water quality could be a major issue if you're getting urates that are coming out like sand and they're gritty, or they're like there's a lump and real hard urate that's like a pebble at the end of the cloaca. I would definitely start looking into your water situation. See if you can maybe switch to RO water from your local aquarium store. You usually sell for about $1 a gallon. You can experiment with spring water. You can try to mix in some distilled water, or just use distilled water, whatever you see that works and clears up those hard urates from your animal. Because what it could do is it gets backed up, and I have to go in there with a syringe and I inject, or at the time when I was having water issues, I would inject water directly into the cloaca, 40 mLs, and a decent sized snake, and boom, it would just, within 15 minutes, he was backed up for weeks, and 15 minutes it flushes everything out. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't pass what it has in it, at least the water's in there to break it up and have it pass it a little bit later. Or if it doesn't work at all, the worst thing that happened was the snake is now hydrated, because it's a way to hydrate your snake is actually squirt water up their cloaca as well. Yeah, bro. It's so going back. So we could talk about imports and captive bred in the same sentence. This is just some of the stuff that you need to know if you want to get into, acclimating your own imports that are fresh, or you pay that captive bred price to a breeder who takes those animals and then acclimates them, and then probably loses a few of them, but then takes the ones he successfully established and then breeds them, and then puts out the USCBB babies to you guys.
Right, exactly. And at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that you're safe from doing a enema, right? There's still situations, even with captive bred stuff, that you might have to run into, right?
But luckily, hopefully you have a breeder that knows how to talk you through, or has a friend that is a breeder that knows how to talk you through some stuff. But breeders get together, and we send some of our people to other people, and they send people to us, and I might be able to help somebody out, or have an experience with something that maybe a breeder that sold a snake to somebody that doesn't have that knowledge, and is level-headed enough to kind of pass the buck a little bit and get the best care for the animal.
Right. Or you could be spoiled like me, and you're one of only 25 exotic vets certified in the world, comes to your garage and doesn't charge you fucking anything. And he
Yeah.
just, dude, he literally did a freaking necropsy of a carpet python that passed away right in my house, did a full necropsy, send off for, a panel to be done after the necropsy, and shook my hand, left my house, and I called him. I said, "What do I owe you?" He said, "Don't ask me that again."
Oh shit. That's nice.
So, yeah, I just low key thinks he likes coming and looking at the snakes. It took him like 6 minutes to do a full necropsy. Those are pretty impressive.
Well, it's like my vet. My vet
Right.
quit, he quit doing, to cats and dogs at a regular vet clinic, and now he travels around the country, he operates on warthogs and stuff, and I retain him on my license every year. And I told him, there's this free snake here. Whenever you want it, just come over. I have one for you. And he's
Right.
like, or like, what do I owe you or whatever? And he's like, nah. He just loves working
Nah.
with like exotic stuff. Yeah, he loves having an educated conversation with somebody. I think it's one of the reasons why he wasn't really loving the regular cat and dog vet office, and wanted to deal with exotics and talk to people that deal with animals you don't see every day.
Bro, have you seen those videos of cats going to vets and how they act? I wouldn't want to do that either. I love cats, but you a cat with a stranger, man, those things are ninjas. They'll kill you.
Yeah, literally, you just described the way my 3-year-old was today.
A ninja.
Savage. No, they'll kill you.
They'll kill you, dude. My 3.5-year-old's the same way right now. Okay, back to the topic of this episode. What are we even doing this episode on? Oh, cat to bred versus wild caught. So I guess I think really the downside and what we're trying to get at here is that you pay a lower price for an import animal, and sure you get the fresh bloodline and you get all that, but there's a lot of work that goes into it that if you want to expose this animal to the rest of your collection, you need to do your due diligence. I have an area in my garage that's pretty far away from the rest of my snakes. So like if I get an animal that's come to me Nido negative, right, I'll send another panel out and everything. But after a shit or two, and after it's already come to me with a negative Nido test, there's a corner in my garage away from everything. It has its own feeding tongs, has its own hooks, has everything, right? It's parasites, Nido, just about very little that I'm aware of is airborne, right? And even at airborne, I have a $600 air purifier in my garage that literally you cannot smell a dead rodent if a snake leaves it. Every time that I feed an animal, I have to check the cage the next day because you won't smell a decaying rodent in my garage until it's like 5 days in.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a badass air purifier. You need it with retics, man. If you get 2 adult retics that shit on the same day and you don't have an air purifier, you're not walking into that garage. You don't want to. I promise. Yeah, so I think that again, man, the sidebarring, I lost it. Just a little update for you guys listening. My wife has had pneumonia for 2 weeks, was in the hospital for 4 days. I am running the show here at the house with the baby, all that stuff. I am exhausted.
Yeah. This is the shit shows what this one is.
It's okay. These episodes are going to happen at the end of the day. I'm talking chondros with you. This episode's for me.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was getting at. I was talking about chondros being, regardless if you get cat to bred or wild caught, quarantine aspect, keeping it away. The listeners are probably like, nope, that's not where you were going. So yeah, I think, what I was saying a while back, and then you mentioned butt stuff. You mentioned going to the butt first with the enema.
Yeah.
I don't think in today's day and age that anybody should be getting a wild caught chondro for their first chondro. I think you need to be getting a captive bred. learning how to perfect their husbandry in your setting, right? Because how I do it is different than how Chuck does it. It's different how Garrick does it. It's different how any of our guests, right? Everybody is different, depending on where they live, barometric pressure, humidity, all that stuff of where they're living at. And once you know how to keep captive breds healthy in your collection, bring in some new imports if you want to breed and you want some fresh bloodline and you want some. I mean, in my opinion, and you can give me your thoughts here, Chuck, but if you're not breeding, there's no reason to get a wild caught animal. There's no reason to get an import if you're not breeding.
I mean, unless you really enjoy the phenotype and you are looking for a challenge after keeping maybe, for a few years, 1, 2 animals, if you want to roll the dice and you can't get your hands on a pure Quarry or there's some red cyclops coming in right now. If you can't get your hands on a red cyclops animal for
you didn't send me anything.
I've been sending them to you.
Oh, just the one like a month ago?
No, there's some on Morph Market right now. I mean, they're not like great examples of red neonate cyclops, but it was a red neonate. But like, if you want to roll the dice on something like that for $1,000, then that's that. I think that's if you want to take on a challenge. I think after you educate yourself about the species and you successfully kept them for a few years, I don't see a problem with it. But for your first, I don't think you have much business doing it, and I don't think it's going to be good for the animal or you or your bank account.
Yeah, I mean, I even think I jumped the gun. I had chondros for a year, and then I got an import right now. Fortunately for me, I didn't have to do anything drastic. But that's I got lucky.
Yeah, but
really lucky.
It's not your first snake. It's not your first chondro. You've bred other animals, so it's like
it's like I've been wanting to get into it. Like I've been wanting the challenge for imports.
I call it the mechanics knowledge.
Right.
Just because you could be a mechanic for 30 years on Ford, Chevy, and Dodge, but if if a Nissan rolls in the shop, you're going to know how to take it apart and fix it. Just because it's a different brand of a car, it's just you have the knowledge of knowing how to take shit apart, having the tools, all that. So that comes into account with your previous knowledge of the species itself. And then you also have the means with your vet that comes over.
Yeah,
So
no, he's a huge hookup.
Yeah, so I think that you're in a better position than most would be to get an import in. So I don't think you should compare yourself to someone that's never had green trees before.
Well, no, I was just saying, generally speaking, like a year into it, it's still like in a general blanket statement, it's still kind of jumping the gun. There are people who get them for their first chondros and they're like third snake ever. Yeah, I mean, sure, I got a good understanding of snakes but for me, I got into the import stuff and Papuan imports. I'm getting Patay's Carinata imports. Like for me, I'm just at the stage where I want the challenge, right? Like I want to establish these animals and work with things that are new and different. And but for me, it comes from a breeding perspective, right? But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like I'm not going to spend $1,000 to $1,500 on a Cyclops import when there's 3 people out there with Cyclops clutches available for 2,000, right? Like I'm going to spend $500 more and get a juvenile and just get an established healthy animal.
Yeah, I think that there's think who you're referring to is like, for example, I have a woman local, sweetheart. It's a friend of a friend. It seems like a really nice lady, really willing to learn. She's never kept a reptile herself or have reptiles as pets, reptiles like in
Right.
general,
Like a reptile, period.
and was asking me what box she would have to keep it in if she bought one of my animals. But she's buying it for her son, who has a lot of reptiles, but she's local, and I think they're coming over. They're coming over next weekend. Her and her husband are coming over because there's so much information to start from scratch with a blank piece of paper that she's going to come over and she's going to see it firsthand. I'm going to be able to explain everything rather than sit there and texting for a couple hours. Cause I had, just essays typed back to her from the questions she was asking. And they were very basic questions. And I mean, nothing against her because every single one of us
has those questions.
Yeah. Every single one of us at one time never had a reptile.
Yeah.
So she's, she's not an idiot. She's willing to learn and asks pretty smart questions. They all have, legitimate reasons behind why she's asking them. But she's green to it because she's asking me what kind of cage do I need to keep it in. So, but I get it. Like she's not into green tree pythons, but she wants one. So I'm more than willing to teach her. But that's because she's buying a captive bred animal. I don't think that a fresh import would probably be the best bet for her right now.
Right. Do you think like places like the Container Store and like all these shoebox people, you think that they know that like probably like 20% of their total industry sales are going towards reptiles? Not even to put shoes in it.
110%. Sterilite.
Yeah.
4 different size shoe boxes. They just came out with a new style that, man, I'm a snake geek because I got excited. I'm like, oh my God, I love this one so much. I can't wait to put this in my rack. And then I would go home and I'm like, dude, like you're weird. Like you're 35 years old and you just got excited that they made a new Sterilite model and you bought it.
Right.
But the measurements are not exactly like on the sticker. The measurements are not the same as the shoebox. 4 different part numbers, 3 kind of similar, 1 completely different. They all fit into the rack perfectly. So yes, to have that sort of accuracy to make sure that the very, very tip and the very, very bottom with the feet built in fit perfectly in a snake rack. They know. Oh yeah.
They know.
They know.
This one's for you, snake people. That's what right. They said.
Why would you make, I mean, to the T, the exact same measurements? And we're talking table height to my hand on top, like feet and everything, the little tiny feet that give you the lift. They know. I'll say it again.
They know.
They have to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing that you got these people local that are willing to come over and ask questions. And again, if you're going a captive bred route, your first snake can be a chondro. I have nothing against that. I don't. Not anymore. Before with all the fear and everything, but like I said, man, these snakes are so easy to keep if you go the captive bred route. Just know what you're getting into when you get a wild caught animal. It's going to be a little bit more work. It's not just you buy the snake for $400, $500, $600 and that's it, right? Like you're gonna need medication. You're gonna need to do testing. You should do testing on a captive bred animal anyways, but you're gonna need to do testing, probably a second test. You're gonna need to preemptively treat for parasites. You better know how to do that because if you don't, you're gonna go to a vet. They're gonna charge you $250, $300 for it, and even then, the medication alone, you're still gonna spend $50. And then, mites being an issue. I think you're more likely in the wild caught realm to get mites than you are in the captive bred realm, but it still can happen in the captive bred realm. It's not unheard of. And so the stress associated with wild caught animals. I mean, Chuck shared a story that happened to him recently with one of his wild caught animals that now is recovering. But, it's just, when you deal with wild caught animals, your stress is going to be a little bit higher. However, for the right people, a wild caught animal is going to be, it can add a lot of value to a breeding program to and again, there's something, Lab Exotics, my brand, my business, my little slogan thing is bringing the wild into your home because I like locality stuff. But, for me, I wanted to live that with actually bringing in imports, establishing them and trying to produce them. And So there's absolutely value to gain by getting import animals. Now, I think that yeah, I don't know what else to really kind of summarize what we're talking about here. I don't want to step on the breeders' feet that are working really hard to try to push the agenda of captive bred, because I'm on board with that, right? But there are people where imports, does something for them, whether it's breeding, whether it's again bringing that wild into your home, whether it's the challenge and the new species, or what I'm really hoping, and same thing with like Dan Maliri, talking to him, good importers, you're not going to be getting those wild caught animals that are put in water bottles, right? Because that's a big thing that we used to see with chondros back in the day, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it still happens. I mean, I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could summarize this up pretty good.
Go for it.
Well, this is a message specifically to the new chondro keepers because this is what this series or what these segments are about. So, speaking to them, it's easy. You can either buy an import or you can invest into a captive bred animal.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Good one liner right there. Oh, something that we didn't even talk about. If you buy imports and you buy them often, some will die. That's just the name of the game. Some are going to
Yeah,
die.
they will.
Yeah.
100%. I say 50-50.
Yeah. Again, fortunately for me, my experience with the fresh import has been flawless, right? And again, but that's not easy to come by. And again, that's because I bought from someone like Dan, who establishes the animals, and he's going to send out a healthy animal. Um, Healthy, and what I mean by healthy is it's not going to be already dead when it's on your doorsteps, because oftentimes with wild caught animals, you get an animal and it's in your possession, gets shipped to you, it's alive, but the snake was dying 3 weeks ago, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
and, and
Yep.
there's no reversing death once it starts. It's rare.
There's so many things, and I saw it with this episode by trying to get a direction. And I know I said I feel like I was all over the place before,
We both were.
but
It's okay.
trying to get a direction when you're talking about the pros and cons of an import as opposed to a captive bred animal, you can't argue one side because there's always exceptions and always like different things. Like I said it out loud and it's the truth. Imports are, my opinion, better feeders when they get to your house. But I've always found that to be the case. And then I get a wild import female and she won't touch a rat until I put chick down on it. And then she took it very reluctantly. And this was
Right.
like the third or fourth time I was offering her a meal.
Right.
It's just, was I a little bit, premature on doing so on trying to make sure that she ate? Maybe because she was a really robust adult female, but I don't want her to get behind the 8 ball.
Right.
You make decisions and you try new things. I didn't see any sort of downside to just putting some chick down on to get a meal on her.
No, I mean, people are doing that with captive bred neos, right?
Yeah, there's I could tell you one thing that I've learned, and it's really like this last clutch is really just branded in my brain is whenever you say, whenever like I would say on podcasts previously or speaking to people, perfect example, feeding pre-shed. I'm not going to do that. I don't
No
want to
need
do
to.
that. There's no need to do it until there was a need to do it.
Right, when
And
they're not doing it, when they're not shedding.
when they're not, yeah, to get them to shed. So I will definitely say that I didn't lie or I just my mindset has changed due to the experiences that I'm having, and I definitely want to retract all of my statements of anything I've ever said with green trees that was you know not detrimental to their health, but I will never not try something or do something that someone else has done just because I don't like it because I've never been in their situation. And when you are, you do it. So
Right. It's always a game of
I got
adjustments.
3 meals in some of these animals that still have not shed yet. Great feeders. So what happens when they shed? Maybe they go off feed. So if I didn't get those 3 meals in them and they were a problem feeder, then now I'm resorting to assist meals when I have a snake that at least has 3 meals in it. So if it gets funky after it's shed, which they do sometimes, at least I have 3 meals in it and I got it to a shed, and now I can it's a little bit more of a robust animal with a few meals in it rather than nothing, and maybe it had a small yolk.
Right.
There's
Right,
so
exactly.
many what ifs, dude.
No, no,
This
so
is
that's
why you pay the captive bred prices, because there's someone else doing all the thinking for you.
yeah, and I mean at the end of the day, one thing that I think is so important that I've learned and what you're basically saying right now is that you cannot live in a black and white world when you're keeping and breeding animals, right? Because you're always going to have the exceptions, and the black and white is going to keep you from growing, right? It can't be this way or that way. It can't be all or nothing. You got to be able to just swallow pride, make adjustments, redact statements. Those type of things happen, and it's just part of growing. But yeah, uh,
Lucas, before I always said, before I bred green trees, I'm going to breed them this way, and that's how I'm going to do it. And I'm not doing that because I don't like the way that is. I don't think that would work for me. And guess what? I've done almost every single thing I said I wouldn't do, and it was the hardest thing. And it goes back to the saying: is if you want to be successful, you better get comfortable being uncomfortable.
right,
And I would just most of the time I have I'm at a dead end, and I call Pat, and Pat or Socrates will tell me to do something. And I think to myself, I really feel uncomfortable doing it. And I'm doing it like 30 seconds after they told me to do it, and it's worked. So that obviously made me more comfortable doing it now that I saw that something that I did worked. And it's just kind of like expanded my palette with trying new things that just have positive theory when you're experiencing a situation you don't want to be in, and you got to get out of it with these animals.
exactly. And let me tell you, man, and one other pro, and I'll end on this when it comes to wild caughts, because I don't feel like we need to just keep drilling the same message over and over. But one pro, like one really valuable thing that keeping wild caught animals will do for you. This was the truth when I got my first pair of wild caught retics only a year into keeping them. And now I'm doing it the same with the wild caught Biak that I have. Um, if you really want a crash course and learn a lot about a species and have a lot of tribulations, a lot of trial and error, and a lot of ways to learn from mistakes, getting an import is a way to do that. You will be a way, way, way better keeper when you keep imports and you have to challenge yourself to overcome health obstacles. Now, at the end of the day, um, don't buy an import because you want to be a better keeper, right? But that is I guess it's a byproduct of getting into imports. Um, you will be a better keeper when you keep imports because you will have to learn how to do things on the fly that you never in a million years thought that you would ever have to do if you just kept captive bred, right?
Yeah, but I think you need to keep the captive bred first so that
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
can educate yourself for a few years on what the snakes are supposed to look like and supposed to do.
Yep.
And then when you get an import, you're not completely overwhelmed with learning basic husbandry in addition to very challenging, fly by the seat of your pants, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
You got to improvise a lot. There's a lot of things you got to do. You'll find your animal have some sort of an issue or sitting funny, or something's up at 10:30 at night on a Thursday. You're not going anywhere to buy any supplies, so you have to make do with what you got
yep.
to fix a problem.
Yeah. I had someone who reached out to me on Instagram because I do this podcast with you and just said, "Hey, thanks for the podcast. Love what you guys are doing. I've been wanting to get into chondros for a while. Um, just bought a handful of imports from Dan." And I was like,
Oh,
oof,
nice.
oof.
Oh,
First chondros ever.
Yeah, I thought about
handful
that halfway through.
handful of imports. And I was
You know
like,
what though?
I mean, it's a way to be, but they're younger. I will say this: they're younger. They're smaller animals, right? So, and again, not going to discourage it. And I was positive with the individual. I said congrats, and I gave him my tips and pointers, right, of just understanding the basic care of these animals and what they need to do. And fortunately, the experience has been smooth with them. And when you get younger animals, right, if they come to you and they look robust and healthy, for the most part, you're going to have a good experience. But yeah, just in the back of my mind, I was like, man, I hope it goes well. Like I praying it goes well.
Yeah, coming from Dan, I don't, I wouldn't. He's kind of like a him and Gary. Um, they're just exceptions to the rule. I mean, one thing I will say to people is when you do deal with an importer, make sure it's an importer that you can call at the very least should you have an issue. I've dealt with a few of them, and I can call them right up if I have any problems, and I have had problems, and have had snakes die. I have been sent sick snakes, but those importers made it right. I just was very transparent with them, and obviously it wasn't my first green tree python, so I knew all the pictures to send them.
Right.
Pictures of temps, pictures of the enclosure, a video of it, popping. It made a pop sound the day I got it. As soon as I took it out of the bag,
That's not good.
anyone else would have just, well, not anyone else, but somebody who's more inexperienced and didn't know what that meant may have just put it in a box, and then it gets sick and they don't know what to look for. They think a wheezing is possibly a hissing. And now 2 months later, their snake dies, and then they call the importer and they complain.
Right. Right.
So me catching that quickly, I was able to try to treat it. It ended up dying, but at least I got the information to the importer, and they just said, you know what? Try to get it better. If it dies, let us know. We got you, because they heard the popping in the video that I sent them,
Right.
24 hours after they sent it. So
Yeah, and that's a good point, and we'll probably talk about we'll probably do another one of these intro segments, but yeah, it's so vital when you get any type of snake, make a video when you take that snake out, whether captive bred or not, because that's your proof, right? And if you are sending information over to a breeder or an importer within 24 hours of it being in your possession, that's your that's your loaded gun, so to say. Like that's what you need in order to, you know, and I tell people even that buy animals from me, like, open up the box, use a temp gun, take a picture of the temperature
mhm.
that the box is on the inside where the snake is, take a video of that snake coming out, like do everything as if I am going to F up. So that way, like, you're not messaging me in a month saying that your snake has A, B, and C. And I'm like, well, why am I just now hearing from it if you're telling me that it's been like this since you got it?
Right. When then if something happened where the heat pack failed and they temp gunned it and it was in,
Yeah,
the
110,
60s,
right?
or the 60s, or the high 50s, and then 3 days later it's popping, you can
Yeah,
tell them, okay, all right, this is what we're going to do early on, rather than if they don't speak to you for 2 months, now it's so far gone into the RI, it's just going to die.
yeah. Now it's just like you need to go to a vet. There's nothing I can do to help you.
Yeah, yeah. But see, we could. There's so many different scenarios. I feel like we haven't even covered like 1% of the subject we're talking on, because there's so many different experiences that I've had. I've seen other people have, that you have. You
Right,
can't, dude. This could be literally like a 6 or 7 hour episode if we were to go into all the subjects we touched and
right.
really go into them deep. So I. That being said, anybody that has any questions or wants any clarification from either of us, like, feel free to reach out. I don't sleep really. I talk to everybody. I'm willing to help anybody out who has legitimate questions that aren't really, a waste of time asking me like silly shit like, hey, can I keep, day geckos in with my green trees, or something dumb like that. But um
It
like
happens, man.
I'm willing to help. Like I'm an open book. Like, I send everybody my feeding notes from my clutches, my observations. I send everybody my breeding, feeding, any sort of medical treatments that I have written down that I try, and I just say, hey, you could try this. This is how I do it. Like, and proceed at your own risk. There's just so much to these animals, and to have like just somebody to reach out. And I'm not speaking specifically about myself. Having somebody reach out to for any sort of guidance is like, you need it, or your snake could possibly die, or a simple problem could be fixed from just some input for somebody who's treated it many times before.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Chuck, man, you got anything else before we wrap up here?
No, I'm good. I suck this episode.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, whether it was on topic, I can always change the title, right? But at the end of the day, it's I think overall we talked a lot about some good precursors to wild caughts, the risk and the pros, and as well as just what you're getting with the CBB. Including, we didn't even talk about lineage with CBB, right? Like that's also worth its weight in gold too. You buy an animal and you can trace back that lineage to the 80s, 90s, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I guess we'll wrap up here. So guys, we're about an hour and a half into the episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in on this kind of intro segment that we're doing. We'll be doing more of these. And I think that we'll even create another episode in the future about establishing imports, going into a lot more detail with that, how to get them established and well going, and some more husbandry 101 stuff. But again, if you guys are tuning in, don't forget about our code for Cold Blooded Cafe Reptile Lounge 20 for 20% off. Thank you to Cold Blooded Cafe for allowing us to be a sponsor. We appreciate you. And again, reach out to Jordan Carpenter at Hearland Reptiles. And again, for those of you that are in the chondro industry, I'm going to say this. A lot of you guys don't have logos. A lot of you guys are not branding. Branding in today's day and age, especially if you're getting into this new, is so important. Hit up AE Foundry, hit up Adler. He is phenomenal at the work that he does. But yeah, we got episode 14 coming up in a couple Mondays, and we look forward to seeing you guys all there.